Good morning, everyone. My name is Jack Gershfeld. I'm from Altinex, and today we're going to talk about AVSnap control mode. So I'm going to set up AVSnap right now, and we'll start from the beginning. There are many different modes of operation for AVSnap. Last 2 weeks, we covered the library designs. We also covered the diagram designs. Today we're going to talk about control. To switch AVSnap into control mode, we change the page size from inches to pixels. So for example, double click on a page, or you can press letter P for shortcut. If anybody forgot, if you press F1, you have shortcuts and you can use those. So if you can see page setup window is shortcut P. So remember, as I taught you before, you use your left hand for the keyboard, right hand on the mouse, and it makes it much faster to work with AVSnap. So press P to have a page size, and now we're going to move into the pixel mode right there. 640 by 480, 800 by 600, 1024 by 768, or any type of custom size. So I'm going to go ahead and select 640 by 480 for easy use, and we'll apply it. And as you can see, when we switch to control mode, it always switches to 100%. So you can zoom in if you want to later and see the grid. But when you press Fit, shortcut F, it always goes 100% because that's how you want to see it once you run it on your computer. Now, if you're using a computer that has 1080p resolution, that's all right. Just double click and go to Custom Setup and 1920 by 1080, and you'll have 1080p. So that's easy to set up. So let's go ahead and apply this. And now that we have our page, we're going to go over some basic menu structures. On the left-hand side, you can see there's a new toolbar. And this toolbar is specifically designed for control applications. The first tool on the top left corner is called a slide bar. And although it looks kind of simple, once you adjust the properties, you can make it look really nice. So I'll go over it in a second. So there's your slide bar. So if you want to adjust the volume, control, or dimmer, you can use the slide. You can, when you double click on it, you have many different options, and one of them is horizontal or vertical. If you want to make it vertical, no problem. Just set it vertical, adjust it, and now you have a vertical control bar. You can go even more than that. You can just rotate it. I set up my rotation angle on the bottom side right here to 15 degrees, so I can kind of rotate it, and if I want to, I can set it up this way. All right, so let's go ahead and put it back. This is my slide bar. The next one we have is a progress bar. A progress bar, the only thing it does, it shows you the progress. For example, if you're trying to connect to a network, or you're trying to download the file, or you're trying to wait until the projector cools off after you turn the system off, this allows you to kind of adjust it so it shows you control the progress of the process. So in this case, minimum and maximum is 100. I'll put position to 30, and you can see how it just shows you progress. All the colors, everything can be adjusted, but just for reference, we'll start with that. The next one is we call button, and button is probably the most versatile object that we have. Now remember, in the diagram design, we used objects like square, rectangle, line. You can still use those, and but these objects are called active objects. And the reason they're active objects is because they will actually do something. When you press it and push it or display it, it will do something. So the button is most versatile because most of the time we'll use button object to switch the pages or to control anything. The next objects we call connection objects. So this one is called TCP object, and it allows you to connect to any TCP device if it's controlled on a network, whether it's a TCP or UDP. That object will connect to that device. You also have a COM object. A COM object is a device that connects through RS-232 port. So if you have a PC or you have a USB to RS-232 port adapter, this object will be used to connect to that adapter. The next object we have is FTP object. If you need to download the file or upload the file to FTP, then you would use this object. Then we go into the edit field. An edit field, a lot of times we use this for entering passwords. So if whenever you want the user input to put something in, for example, if you set up a directory where you have specific people can log in to this particular control program, then you would put the passwords in, and the person would be able to type them in and then say OK, and it will accept it. So we use it both for password and also for data entry. Now notice that if it's used as a password field, you can select it here. Nothing is going to be displayed. There's no letters going to be displayed. It's going to be just stars. The next object is the email object, and that object allows you to send emails using AVSnap. So a lot of times we use it if you want to have a feedback. Let's say you're monitoring the system and now you cannot connect to your projector, or projector reports that the lamp is at 5,000 hours and needs to be replaced. So you can set up so it will automatically mail you back the information and basically warnings. The other things you can do with email object is to control your system. For example, you can use the field, subject field, to send commands directly to your system. So if you locate it remotely and you want to power system off, you can just type in off in the subject line, send it to this email address, and the system will power off. Then we have app object, which is not visible on the page, but that controls lots of different functions. For example, put computer to sleep, wake it up, switch at predetermined period of time, switch to a different page. So we'll use this quite a bit. And then image object. Image object allows you to load the images. For example, if you have images for the buttons or for your sliders, you can load all these images here and then use it directly from this library. It makes it easier to design overall user interface. So that kind of finishes all the active. This is all of our active objects. The passive objects, the rectangle and circle and line, they all still work, so you can do a lot of graphical user interface and fine-tuning of how it looks using those objects. So with this in mind, let's look at the screen and see if we have some other new stuff on the screen when we're in control mode. Now, if you want to know if you're in control mode, look on the top bar, and you'll see that AVSnap, untitled, control mode. If you're in design mode, it would say design mode, but right now we're in control mode. On the bottom left side, you can see you have IP address, 192.168.1.127. That's my computer's IP address. If you're working on a specific computer, you would have this IP address. You also get a MAC address. A MAC address uniquely defines your computer on the network, and we use it to identify where the program can run. So you can lock your program to run on a specific MAC address. If you don't want the users to move it to a different PC or use it in multiple places once you write it, then you can just lock it to the MAC address. So that's basic information. What we want to do is to jump to the application object and take a look at our network. Okay. In this case, I have different network adapters, and I also have a wireless network adapter. You can switch to wireless network adapter, and you can see mine is not connected, so the IP address on the bottom line is shown as 000 because we're not connected to anything. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my original adapter. If you want to broadcast anything on TCP to all adapters, you can just say default, and it will send it to everybody. So that's an overall active object. So I'm going to go ahead and delete them, and we're going to use them in a second as we go through design. And what I'd like to do is to tell you how I set up the pages before I start designing the user interface. And I have set number of pages that I use, and those pages are always set up in the beginning of the project, and then I add the pages as needed. So in this case, we're going to have 640 by 480. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to add a template. Add a template. So I'm going to add a new page, and for right now, I'll add 5 pages. We'll see if we need all of them, but I'll just add 5 pages. And I'm going to call one page, number 6 of the template. I'm going to right-click on the page tab and type template. Now, the name itself doesn't mean anything. It's just a name, but it gives me a good understanding what I'm going to put on this page. And in the template, I'm going to click right here. There's a button called T, Set as Template Page. And I'm also going to make it invisible. Invisible because I don't want to see it. I just want to see there's a little star here after the name of the template. That means that if I want to print it or do anything, this page is not visible. And the first thing I do, I select a background. because for every application I need some kind of background. So luckily if you go on AVSnap into download section, we have backgrounds, and those backgrounds are available. They're free of charge, and we hired artists to do different backgrounds, so you can use them. Let me pick one background. Let's say simple, 640 by 480. There's my background. I'm going to right-click on it, and I'm going to copy image, and I'm going to paste it right here. And there's my background. Okay, so you can see that I pasted it right one-to-one, and that's going to be my background, and that's my template. So I'm going to also design a second template right away, and I'll call it template 2. Okay, and I can probably call this template 1. Makes it a little bit easier. I'm going to design template 2, and I'm going to put exactly the same background on it. Copy paste, but I'm also going to put a button on template 2, and the button is going to be go home. Okay, so that's all what I'm going to say is for the button to be home. So I'm going to go ahead and set the button here, and in a second we're going to make it look pretty. I know it's right now it's kind of plain vanilla, but it's okay for the purposes that we want to do here. It's okay. Double click on the button, and I'm going to say home. Now notice that you can actually have different text depending on the state of the button. So if the button up is home, if it's disabled, if it's down, or if I have mouse over the button, you can change the text. You can also put multi-line text if needed. In this case, I'm just going to make it the same. If you say OK, it will put home. If you double click, you see it's automatically populated, all of them with the same name. Notice that currently the text is on the top left corner. I'm going to use letter H to move it to the center, H for horizontal alignment. I'm going to use the letter V for vertical alignment, and now I have it on the center here. So sometimes you look at the text and you say, well, I don't like it. I'd like it to be all capital letters. So you come here, you clear the text, and just type in home. And now you have it all set. So right now it's just a button. It doesn't do anything because we don't have a home page yet. So that brings me to the next page that I set up. I like to set up a home page. And the home page is going to be a page where you land when you start the program. When you run the program first time, it will end up on the home page. So the first page in this tab right here, list, is the home page. So if I move page 2 to the front by clicking on the tab and just moving to the front, now my home page became page 2. So I'm going to go move it back to where it was. So here's my home page. It's empty right now. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to apply the template to it. So let's go, first we're going to set template 2 as a template and invisible. Go to home, and right here there's a drop down control. And template 1 and template 2 is available there, so I'm going to go template 1. So this is how you set up a background for your page. The reason you want to do it this way, because now you can draw on top of it without worrying of changing the background. Also, if you want to do global changes on all the pages, then you can do it on a template and it will modify all the other pages. So when I get to the home page, usually I'll have a button that says press here to start. So let's go ahead and put the button on the center. Okay, and I'm going to double click on it and I'm going to type press to start. I just tell users that you need to press the button to start. I use H for horizontal, V for vertical, and then I'm going to put my mouse pointer right over the font size, and you can see there's a little wheel appears next to the mouse pointer. That means you can use your mouse wheel to adjust the size of the text. So I don't have to retype it, I don't have to do anything. If you want to change the font, you just put your mouse right over the font, and you can just scroll and change to different fonts to get whatever font you want on this, okay? So there's a press to start, and normally customer will give me their logo or something, and I will put the logo. So I'll just put AVSnap as a logo that I had prepared before, and I'm just going to put it right here. And there's my home page. So now I'm going to go back to the template page 2. You see where it says home here? I want to make sure whenever I press this button, it goes to home page. So I'm going to right-click on the button and say page link right here is a page link. Click on the page link and select the page. Now notice you can select home page right there. Home page. Notice you have many other ways of doing the buttons. One is that you can go to the first page, previous page, next page, last page. You can also put URL link if you want to go to our outside website. You can reload the current file. So if you have your file located on the server and somebody else is working on it and you're working in the front testing it, you can always have a temporary button that says reload the file and then run it again. Okay, and you can also load another AVSnap file. So you may have multiple programs and multiple files that call each other depending on what needs to be done. And you just say OK. So now we have a home page. We have a template page, a template 1, and template 2. So the next page I want to do is what we call control page. That's where I'm going to do my control, okay? Control page. And for control page, I'm going to apply template 2 so I can go back to home. So template 2. So you can see my button appears right away. On the home page, I don't have home button because that's the beginning page, but on control page, I have home button. Then I also create another page. I call it a blank page. And blank page, the reason I do that, sometimes I need to switch or black something out, or let's say if I go to screensaver, I may want to put a black screen without actually displaying anything else. So what I do, double click on the page, and I'm going to change the background color. See the page color? And I'm going to change it to black. I'm going to apply it, and that's my background. Now remember, this is just a grid, so there's really not to worry about anything. You can press letter G to get rid of the grid, but if you're going to be putting controls on the page, you may want to have a grid to align them all together. The next page I want to do is what we call objects page. So I'm going to put objects, and these are objects that I like to use to control my environment, okay? So in this particular design, I'm going to use TCP control, and then I'm going to put, let's say, 3 objects for TCP. And I'm going to also use one COM control because I'm going to have one RS-232, so I'm going to put a COM control. So typically I set up the project, the template page, the objects page, so that I can easily reference to the objects. We don't want to put them, although you can put on any page, once you have them in the project, they're going to be used. But I like it to be in one page we're dedicated to it. There's no template on this page, so you cannot get to that page any other way except during the design. Okay. Maybe you can hear me right now. I did lose the sound. My phone went a little bonk on me. Can you hear me right now? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Back on track. So we have our objects. I put one COM objects, and the reason I like to put them on a separate page because if I need to make some notes, I can just press letter T, put some notes, control amplifier, something like this, and put it right next to it. So this way, later on when I need to come to the design and check what I've done, I know what I used each object for. But in any case, we will define the name of the object, and it will be self-evidence where it's used, okay? So now that we have our control page, the last page that I need to create is what I call a diagram page, and that's what we call control diagram page. So I'm going to add a new page. I'm not going to duplicate the page formats because it's not going to be in the project mode. And I'm going to double-click, go ahead and change page back to white color, and I'm going to also make it size A for right now. So this is going to be my diagram. The reason I like to have this page, because 3 months to 6 months, 9 months after you finish the programming, you left the site, and then one day you come back and you need to adjust it, you're going to have to know how everything is connected. You're going to need to understand the overall diagram. So what I've done, I draw a little diagram, and I'm just going to copy paste it right now, and I'm going to go over it with you. So let's take a look at the simple diagram that I usually put together. I call it a rat nest diagram because there's only straight lines. I don't make it pretty, but I make it so that I can later on come back and understand what happens. So in this case, I have one projector, RS-232 port, 9600 baud, 81 non-COM2. Okay, that's great. One NEC monitor, RS-232 port. Okay, I also have a contact closure for screen going up and down. I have a multitasker matrix switcher that sits on RS-232 port. I have video conferencing that I need to control on 192.168.1.60, port 3C001. And then I'm going to go down here and say, all right, I'm using one of my neutron controllers. It's an Altinex product, CP500-100. It is on this IP port, 192.168.1.50, port 24. Okay, and this one has a COM port available, and 2 COM ports available, and 2 relays available, and there's and then the IP port goes to the IP switch. We also have a second neutron controller, and the same product except different IP address, port 24. It also goes to the IP switch. Then we also have a touch panel. A touch panel is just basically a small PC running AVSnap on it, and that's the program it's going to run. It's going to run this program. And then I have COM4 if I need to use it. But I'm going to go ahead and remove COM4 and say this is my setup. So later on, when I come back after I finish programming, I know exactly what's connected to what. Now, in many cases, I would also put an IP switch IP address if there's a control, if it's controlled IP switch. So let's just put 192.168.1.25 for right now. And I also have a touch panel. So now that I understand what's happening and I see my diagram, now in many cases it's much more complicated, so you may have to go to a larger page size. But in general, think of it as the rat nest. You just draw the lines. It should not take you, more than half an hour for a big system to put together. But it's critical that you have it, and it becomes part of the control file. So in addition to having control, you also have diagram available. So let's come back home here. And now I'm going to say when I press Start key, I want to go to my control page right here. Okay, so right-click, page link, and select Control. So when I press the Start key, I will go to Control page. When I press Home, I will go to Home. So that's my setup. And you can set up multiple pages to do that, okay? Let's also, this page 3, which is a blank page, I'm going to go ahead and call it blank. So for easy reference, okay? Now, let's make this button a little bit prettier. Right now it's kind of simple. You can definitely use bitmaps to put in the button, but we also have some features that allows you to make it look nice. Let's go ahead and click on it, and we're going to go on the button fill page, okay? Enable button colors, and already you can see that the colors became nice. And I just set it to default, okay? And you can now adjust button up, adjust the colors, beginning colors and ending colors, button disables, button down, mouse over the button. And border size, you can also enable the ring around the collar, enable ring around the collar of the button, so if you want, so you can put a little ring like this. So pretty much anything you want, you can make it. And in addition, you can also put different text type and font depending what position the button is in. So if it's a button up, you can have one text, mouse over different text, If you want to have different font, that's also fine. So that gives you a quick way of setting up the buttons, all right? We'll do this in a second, but I just want to go over the buttons and come back to the control page and do the same thing here. Okay, now notice when I'm in control page and I'm trying to push this button right now, nothing happens. And the reason is because it's located on a template page. So it will become active once we run the project, but it's not active right now. So we're going to go to template 2. There's a button right here. Press letter B for property, as in boy. Go to the button fill and just fill it, and I'm set. So there's my design. In a few minutes, I have the finished design. So let's look at a couple of other things that we can do before we actually run the project. Now, if you see right here, there's a run menu. On the main menu right there, there's a run menu. And F9 allows you to run the program immediately. So if I press F9, I'm running the program right now, and it's fully operational. So you can see I can go to home, and I can go back to press start. Okay, so I can jump anywhere you want. So, and I don't have to do any code programming. I just pressed F9. Now F11 brings up the code window, and this is where you're going to actually code your design. This is where you're going to make things smart. You can make a lot of things working without the code, but for more complicated stuff, you still need to use code. And to make the code a little bit easier for you, we created an insert function that has some code already pre-done for you. So if you need to put an if statement, if this button is pressed, do this, you can just press if, and it inserts the code right for you. Okay, I'm going to remove this. You can also insert a for, while, repeat, case, procedure function. These are pre-done for you. If you want to know what keywords are used in the programming, it gives you a list of keywords. Also gives you a list of functions available. And we have many different functions available. Now, it may seem complicated, but don't get too stressed over it right now. These are simple functions if you need to connect integer to string or string back to integer, if you need to bring things to lowercase or uppercase. These are straightforward, and many times we have examples that show you how to do this. So it may look a little bit intimidating, but once you start programming, it becomes pretty straightforward. And finally, we also have a user code. A user code is basically a code that we wrote where you can take the whole function all at the same time and just insert it. So for example, if you want some kind of a delay, after you push the button, you want to delay half a second before you send information to a projector, you may just put a delay. And here's your function with a delay, double digits. So you can put delay, 100 milliseconds, and this will automatically do it for you. There's nothing for you to write. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this right now. You can also edit the user code. So user code is nothing but a file that has all this information. If you want to put your own code in, let's say you write something up and you say, I want to create my own user code, just go to edit user code, and the notepad will open up, and here's your functions right here. Just separate each function with a double line and a horizontal string like this with the stars, and then you're done. So all of these are located here, so you can modify them, change them, adjust them, and it's still going to work for you. So let's going to go a little bit more complicated now. And let's create another button where we're going to do something on the projector, okay? So I'm going to select input 1 on the projector, let's say. So I'm going to create a button here and double click on it. Input 1 to projector. And that's going to be my function right here. Now I'm going to press letter B for shortcut for the properties. Immediately I want to make it look a little bit nicer. So I'm going to come back and say, I'm going to make it a little bit darker here. And if you move your mouse over a specific color, you can adjust colors separately. Okay, so in this case, I make it a little bit green. So there is a button for me. All right, and I want to make it bold so it's easier to see. And there's my button. The only difference right now, it doesn't do anything because it's not attached to any type of a code. so it can't really do anything. So let's go ahead and see if we can adjust the object so we can actually do some actions. So in this case, I'm going to double click on this object, and I'm going to set up some parameters from the control page. Remember from the from our diagram page, I'm going to call this neutron1. That's just a name, so there's no issue as far as connecting anything, just a name. We want to have the Keepalive checkmark on, and the reason is the program will automatically send a little beep to the device and say, are you still alive? Are you still alive? Are you still connected? And if you send the beep and it doesn't connect, it will tell you no connection. It will create an error. And you see right here we have on error go to this function right here. So you can trap the function that says, hey, somebody disconnected or switch went down or something. We also, instead of going to all, we're going to make it very specific which the network adapter I want to use. Because in your application, you may have a couple of network adapters. In the way I usually set up the system, I have one network connection that goes to the outside world, and I have one network connection that controls all the AV equipment. This way, if you need a technical support, somebody else can get from the outside to the PC, help you with technical support without and still be able to test the full system through the second network adapter, NIC adapter. So in this case, I'm going to focus right on the Realtek PCIe adapter. The host is what we're going to control. So I'm going to put 192.168.1.50. As you remember, we had port number 23, 24. We're going to say local port. We'll leave it at 0. In some very specific cases, you may want to use local port. Normally, PCs will assign their own local port. But in some cases, when we do video streaming, you will need to assign a local port. Timeout, always put 1000 milliseconds. And then buffer command delay, we use at 0. But if there's a hardware that requires delay between the commands, you can wait 20 milliseconds before sending next command. Okay. So that's configured. We want this name to be the same as trigger name. So I'm going to put trigger names, yes. And there's nothing in the code, so you can say yes or no, doesn't matter. So you can see now I have the code neutron1 characters. When we receive a character on this port, do something, and we'll be able to decide what we're going to do. Now, on the right-hand side, we have different options. In this case, I'm going to say use code to control open and close. So it means I want to automatically open the connection and close the connection. I don't want the program to do it for me. If you want the program to manage it, you just click open close port on program execution, and that's it. Or open and close port for each transmission. So it's up to you. But I like to do it manually. Many people prefer to do it right here. And finally, you have a use code to control the flow. I also like to use code to control the flow, but if you don't want to, you can always say, wait until you receive this character is received for 20 milliseconds before you send something else. So there's kind of a bunch of options here. They're a little bit advanced, but right now we're just going to focus on use code to control the flow. That's it. That's all set up, and we can apply this, and we'll be set with a TCP. You'll notice that there's a couple of other options here that we'll use in the future, more advanced training. We can set up as a server mode. That means we will become a server. We can transmit data in UDP mode, which allows you to transmit information to multiple controllers at the same time, but they need to have a capability of actually being controlled using UDP. We also can do multicast mode. So all of this is for advanced application. We'll talk about it. Let's go ahead and apply this. And you can see all of these function now is incorporated right here and gives you a clean information of what the settings are. So now that we have our neutron1 set up, we're going to go back to control and say, when I push this button, I want input on the projector to switch to input 1. So I'm going to double click on it, and I see my text, but what I actually want to go to the properties. So I'm going to press B, and I'm going to call this input. Call this button input. And right here, I'm going to say index. Because if you have more than one input, you may have input 1, input 2, input 3, input 4, and so forth. So you may want to set up an index. If you're going to have only one input, you just want to force the input 1 on the projector, then you just don't need index. We're going to apply this, and then I'm going to say trigger name. See, right now it says button 3, but in our case, we want it to call input. We say yes, and it says input, click, input down, and input over. All right? I'm going to apply that. So now is the magic, that's when the magic happens, when we connect the button to the code. So we're going to say, on click, I want to go to this code. And it says, are you sure you want to add a new procedure? And you say, yes. You want to add a new procedure. And this becomes grayed out. That means that's it, you're done. The procedure is there. You can definitely remove this procedure, but for right now, it's part of the design. So I'm going to say, okay. And now we're going to go to F11, which is the code. And you can see now, this is the input click procedure. And if I move my mouse here, it says input, on click, go to input click. So we now connected this button to this code. And they're now together. So the only thing that remains for us to do is to type in the code that does something. So I'm going to go ahead and type the code and explain to you what that code means as I type it. So in this case, I'm going to say if, and I'm going to put prefix called not. If neutron controller is not connected, then I want it to be connected. So I'm going to put neutron 1. And as soon as I put a period, you can see that the available commands for the neutron objects are displayed on the right-hand side, and you can decide what you want to use. In this case, I want it to be connected. So I'm going to check. This basically says, check if the neutron controller is connected to this program. If it's not connected, then I want you to connect it. And I want to be connected. Okay? And I put semicolon. So that's what one line does. So the first thing when we press the button, it will check if it's connected. If it's not connected, I want to connect it. The second one is I'm going to send a command through a neutron controller. And that has specific syntax related to the neutron controller capabilities. And for different devices, if you're using something else, if you use AMX or Crestron or any other devices, they will have their own syntax. So you can type your own syntax. But in this case, just for demo purposes, I'm going to use the controller that I'm familiar with. So I'm going to put neutron 1, and I'm going to say write string. And you can see right here, write str. I want to write a string to neutron controller. And in this case, the string will be enclosed in 2 single quotes. And for this particular controller, I have to put this command. 2 triangular bracket RS1, that means RS1 is RS-232 port 1. Open bracket, I want to send I102 close bracket, and that's it. So the way it reads is, when I press the button, check if you connect to neutron controller. If you're not connected, then connect. Then send the command to neutron controller by addressing RS-232 port number 1, and I want to send this command through this port that will go and switch input 1 to the projector. And finally, I can close the port, okay, if you want to. Some people will leave the port open until the program closes, which is okay. There's no problems. In this case, I want to disconnect the port, and we're done. So here's a simple function that allows you to connect to the neutron controller, switch the projector to input 1, and disconnect, and everything is honky-dory. So that's a simple code. I'm going to leave it at that, and I'm going to press F9, Control F9, to check if there's any errors. If you can see on the bottom, it says compiled successfully. It compiles things on the fly, so it's very quick. So Control F9 compiles it, and if you want to run it, you press F9, and it will run. Now notice, while you're running it, you still have your code on the right-hand side, so you can see what's going on. And you can do a step functions where you can say, okay, I want it to be a step through the code and make sure that everything works fine. You can also put breakpoints and say, when you get to that line, I want you to stop, so I can see what the variables look like. So here, to do this, I just click right next to the line right here to set up a breakpoint. So now when I start the program, it will end up like this. I'm going to press start. Now notice that different windows end up at different places. So let's see if we can fix that so they're all together, okay? Double click on properties here, graphical user interface, okay? And right here we have a function called align with the startup page, okay? That means everything will be aligned with the startup page. I also have it to be movable. You can also remove the borders if you want. And then once you apply it and you run it, you can see that when I press, everything stays in one place, okay? Notice that on the home page, it didn't remove the borders, but it removed it here because the remove the borders is based on the per page, and we can go back to the home page and remove the borders. Now, everything's great, and when I press the button, it sends the signal to the controller, except we don't know if it did it or not. There's no way to see it. So we have a function called F3, function F3. So we'll press F3, and what you end up with is what we'll call port viewer. A port viewer is the port. It's a screen that allows you to view every port and see what's happening on the port. So this way, when you're actually trying to troubleshoot the problem and see, are you receiving the right command, you can look at the port viewer and see if the commands are coming through, are going the right place. So in this case, now I don't have anything actually on the network with this address, so it will be disconnected. But when we press the button, it will try to connect. So let's go ahead and if I press the button, and you can see that the neutron disconnected. It says it went red because it told me it's not connected, and that's how in real life you would see, hey, there's no neutron controller or there's something's missing because it's red. It tried, but if it would be connected, this is the command that it would send. And then finally it says disconnected, okay? So remember we had two lines. One says connect. It tried to connect, but it couldn't connect. No, one line says current status. Then it says connect. It tried, it couldn't connect. And then finally it says disconnect, and it's now disconnected. And so this is a way to track all of your progress. So you can see between this and pressing F11, in a development mode, when you're actually working on this, trying to get the program going, you have all the views available, and you can see what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and put a check mark right here, which is my point where I want to stop. And then I'm going to come back here and say, press the button. As you can see, as soon as I press the button, it stopped right here. It said red, and it says, I'm right here, but I'm not going anywhere until you do something else. When you go to run object, you can step into this function, or you can bypass it. Most of the time, you would press F7. So I'm going to press F7, and you see now it went next one, next line, and you can watch it on the left-hand side as it goes through. So now, as it goes through, we're going to close the disconnect neutron controller, and it now disconnected, and this function is over. So that's how simple it is to go back and forth between different functions. Let's come back here and see if we can go through a couple of other things. So a couple of other things I want to talk about a little bit about the clock object. It's a simple object, but I like to put on the page. So in the clock object, you just put on the page, and it will just run the clock. There's a couple of options here. One is the offset. If you need to offset the hours, you can do 24-hour format if you want right here. You can show date if you want. You display only date or display seconds and minutes and an hour. So again, if you don't want the box around it, you just go to set line to nothing, and now is your clock. So when you run it, the clock runs all the time. So as soon as you run it, come here, and there's your clock running. So you can see that whatever changes you make, they will automatically be propagated instantly, and you can compile instantly. Now let's look at the little bit more advanced feature, just a little bit, so you understand what other capabilities are. If you go into the run mode, right here we have a server settings. AVSnap is free for use for anybody who wants to use it. There's a couple of functions that are paid, and this is one of them. It's called the server settings. If you want to be able to control your control system through a web browser from any iOS or Android devices, then you would probably need a server to do this. In the server setting, it says that web server is running in demo mode, and you can actually enable a web server features, and this would be on port 81. You also define what is the default page when you start up the server. What is the 404 page? That means that if the page is not there, where does it go? And if there's an error, where would it go? Picture quality, display graphical user interface. You can even secure the pages. If you want it to be secure, that means that nobody can look at the URL and say, oh, I know how to get to that page. You press secure pages. And I like to send buttons as pictures. So this way it doesn't rely on the rendering on the browser, but whatever you render it on your screen, it will be exactly the same way. And send their pages horizontally within the browser. And I like to also to compress PNG images for faster loading, but I like to use 24-bit. So this way you have a nice and smooth transitions. You can also adjust your logo if you want to import a different logo that goes into the tab bar on the browser. Then you can do this. For example, right here, that's a logo that will show up if you put a web logo here. The other thing you can do is automatically minimize the text that says you have a web server running. So we'll see it in a second. And timeout session is 10 minutes. That means if you don't touch the control, it times out. And page transitions, I like to use blend. So as you switch between different pages, you kind of blend in between. And transition point 1 second is good. We do want to use Ajax. So pretty much that's it. So how do we get to that page? How do we know that this page is actually working? Well, remember it's port number 81. And you remember your IP address. So if I go and open the browser, I can put in this IP address right here, 192.168.1.1.127. That's my IP address, colon, port 81. And I'm going to hit enter. Now you'll notice that there's nothing there because we're not running yet. We're just in the design stage. So if I press F9, it says web server is enabled. In 10 seconds, this will disappear, but I can just click ahead of time. And I can go ahead and click this again. And you can see that you now have a browser running with exactly the same function. The only difference is once you have the license, this will disappear. Okay, so if you press a button here, it switches to this. If you press a button here, it switches to this. Now, if you press a button here, it switches to this. Okay, so you can now run it in the browser mode, and you can see it's automatically centered. You can adjust this. It will center everything. You can also do automatic refresh if you need to. You can do automatic, so you can refresh it here also. Okay, and you can definitely press this button. So if we look at F3 on the function here, and we press this button, you can see that we initially started the command. So whatever you do in the browser will happen in here. Okay, and then go back home and you're done. So that's how we address it. Now, in the browser, if you want to know how to license this, if you go to licensing, right here it says enable server. So this is your MAC address. You put your company name, and you send us this information. We issue registration key. Once you put registration key, your AVSnap will be registered to that computer, and you can run that computer with this. So when you're doing development on your local laptop, you may want to get additional license just so you can do it on a local laptop. but that's a quick way of doing it. Now, once you've finished all of this, you can now save this program as executable file. So you don't have to you don't have to provide the actual file that you can open. You can give them just executable file, whoever needs it. So let's go ahead and file save as executable. And I'm going to say control PJ, projector. And let's go ahead and save it on the desktop. And as soon as it's going to show up there, and there's my control file. So if I run this control file, now this is AVSnap running here. This is a browser running right here. Now I'm going to run control. And you can see, once it's running, it's all by itself. It's a standalone program. You don't need anything else to run it. If you want to change the logo or anything else, you can just go back to the properties, GUI interface, and right here you can download a different logo. So once you upload the logo, it will display a different logo here. And it basically gives you a full capability of doing whatever you want with this from the executable program. Some people ask me if they can adjust the text. So for example, if you double click on it and it starts running the program and you press escape to quit it, it says, do you want to close AVSnap? Well, instead they want to put, do you want to close my program or something? Well, definitely we have this capability. If you go into File and it says Change Language, or we want to go to Language Editor. This is the language editor right here, and it basically says here's all the different. I have two languages loaded right here just because I had a friend who translated everything to Russian, but we have multiple other new languages. You can define your own language. So right here is just a file. You can modify all the text here to make it look like it's completely your custom program. Or you can adjust it to your own language. If you speak a different language, you can just go and create a new language and add this language to it. All right, we're about 10 minutes before the end of the session. I'm going to pause the screen for a second, and I'm going to switch to different modes so we can all talk. And in this case, let me just switch this.
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6.
Okay, and we're now in the mode where all of you guys can talk. If anybody wants to ask any questions, please just unmute yourself, and you can go ahead and ask the questions on how this works. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and close the executable program here, and I'm going to delete this, but it gives you a good idea how you can move from one to one. And if you need to create more pages, it's not a problem. You can just add new page, make 2 more pages or 3 more pages, and duplicate the page format without copying objects. So I'm going to just duplicate the format. You can see I can add 3 pages, and I can say audio control, and then I can say video conference control, and maybe matrix control. So if I would do a matrix control, I would set up a first button, and I would call it input 1. Because we have automatic numbering here, we can automatically number them different ways. So I'm going to go to property first, and I'm going to say that this is my matrix input button, and I'm going to call it button number 1. So now whatever displays here corresponds to the index. Now if I copy paste this, now I have input 2, copy paste, input 4, and copy paste my input 8. Select all of them, move it back to the page, and then I would take the same thing and copy it, and that's going to be my output, for example. Clear text, output 1. Then I would go back to the properties here, and I'm going to say matrix out, and I will put index 1 from beginning, apply, and then I would say output 1, 2. Let's say I have 4 outputs. So here's your basic setup for 8 by 4 matrix switcher. Okay, they all indexed by themselves, so you can run the code. So now let's go to the input number 1, and I'm going to say copy the trigger name to here. So and it says yes. You see, matrix input click, matrix input down, and what I'd like to do is to be able to copy all of this to the other buttons. Okay, without clicking on each button. So I'm going to set the properties so the button looks nice. Okay, right-click on it and say Copy Properties. Once I copy these properties, I can select all the input buttons, right-click, and say Paste Properties. In this case, I want to change the artistic. I don't need text. I want to change the name. I want to change the triggers. And everything else lives the same. So now that I copied it, they're all already set. If I go to this button, you can see that my matrix input, index number 2, and all of them are now pointing to the same on-click functions. So the only thing I need to do is to click here and say I want on-click to go here, and we're set. Now the other thing you can do, if you're using, for example, 8 input by 1 outputs, let's say. Let me go ahead and do this, for example. Let's say if it's not matrix, but simple input, so you can just remove this, that's my output. I can set input 1 as default and say this is going to be a down. You can see this is down. But I'm also going to put it in exclusive mode. So all of them are exclusive mode. That means that when I press 1, the others will come up. So in this case, I'm going to run the program. Now this is a matrix control. So I'm going to create a button here. This button, I'm going to go to matrix control instead. So page link. Where's your matrix control? And we're saved. Oh, we don't need to right now. Just press F9 and you're running. Server is enabled. So I'm going to go here. And I can also refresh here. And I can go here. So you can see they match each other. And then, as you can see, when I press the buttons, only one is selected because it's exclusive mode operation. Okay. So there's many other functions that you can do for the buttons, and you can make it transparent if you have something that you want something to press on, but you don't want to see the button. You can make it transparent, and it's not going to be visible. Okay. And you can also make it non-focusable. So in some cases, you may want a button to operate, but then after you press another button, you want this button not to be focusable. You still want it to be on the screen, but nobody should press it. Okay. And then now you can define the images. If you want specific images for each of the buttons, you would define the images here. And right now, remember we had an image object right here on the left-hand side. That's where you would take the images from. And then you can define it for each of the buttons. Okay, in some cases, we have requirements where you need to hold the button down before anything happens. So let's go ahead and see if we can make this work. So I'm going to go back to the control. And from home, I'm going back to control and make sure that I right-click, page link to control. And then I'm going to go to control and say, I don't want it to be when I press the button, but I want to hold it for 2 seconds before anything happens. Especially it's done when you're trying to turn off the projector. You don't want to accidentally somebody touch it and projector turns off. You want to press it and hold it. So right here on this button, you have a hold time. So you can say, if I use, I don't know, 200 milliseconds, maybe 200 is a little bit too small. Let's say 1,000, 2,000 milliseconds. That will give me a 2-second delay before anything happens. So I'm going to go ahead and run it. I'm going to press F3 to give me the port viewer, press start, and then I'm going to press it. But look, nothing happens, okay, for 2 seconds. And then you have this command, okay? So that means unless you hold it for 2 seconds, no commands will come out. and that's kind of protection. So does anybody have any questions? If you have any questions, you can unmute yourself. If there's no questions, let me see if there's anything on the chat. Okay, I have a couple of questions on the chat here. So yes, you can, the number of characters right now is listed 10,000. You can make it less and it will scroll over. The other thing is if something's scrolling through, you can always freeze it and say, wait a minute, don't scroll too fast. Freeze it and take a look at it. You can also view selected ports. For example, if I only want to see TCP port, there's no reason for me to do any other ports, okay? So I can clear it. I will now only track Neutron 1 port because that's the only one I selected. Did somebody have any question? Did somebody have any question?
Yeah, hi, Jack. It's
all right.
Yeah.
We're right at. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I have amassed a lot of images trying different buttons, different styles and colors. Is there a way to delete images from that catalog for buttons?
Absolutely. So if you have it here, just select the image and click delete right here. It will come off of here, no problems.
Great, thank you.
Make sure you don't use these images on any of the buttons.
Of course. So when's version 6 going to be ready?
We're trying to do it this week. Maybe the latest probably is going to be middle of next week. We're just finishing up some libraries and some final testing on the code, and we'll release it.
Terrific. And thank you again for this program. I think it's a terrific program.
You're welcome, Connie. Thank you. All right, we're out of time now. If you need any additional help, feel free to email us or call us or chat. Go online and you can chat with us. There's also a forum that you can go to. So go from here to forum. You can sign up and just ask questions on the forum. That will work also, okay? It was great talking to you this morning. Everybody have a great afternoon, and we'll see you next week. Take care.